Dollar, dollar, dollar. Dirt or money, no soul. Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack and flip for my foes. Dollar, 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 dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar, 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 dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money long, get my team strong. Let me run away from my problems.
Yo, what's good, original crew, man? We're back. Hey, we got another ballin' on today, man. We got this found footage will haunt your dreams. Not I, said the cat. I don't believe all that, man. I go to sleep peacefully at night.
Do you?
Do you? I'm legit asking a question.
I like how you act.
Do you?
Yeah.
Do you ever sleep peacefully? If not,
the question should have been like, do I ever sleep? I guess I'm peaceful, but yeah, I sleep peacefully every night.
Yeah, so I don't think that's gonna haunt me, cause I go to sleep with some calming and soothing on every night. put my mind at ease. I don't go to think with a lot of stuff on my mind, you know. Hey, make sure y'all check out the links in the description box.
Down below.
You already know where to go if you want to first support. You got to do is check out down below. Also, if you enjoyed today's video.
Like it with a thumbs up.
That's all I'm just saying, see.
I feel you.
That's how best way for me to sleep. I have to put on something like, you know what I'm saying, just very calm and soothing. But let's go. Let's hop into it, y'all. Let's check it out.
Today, we're going to look at 3 places you can't go and people who went there anyway. Today, we're going to look at 3 places you can't go and people who went there anyway. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the like button's house and replace all of their family photos of pictures of you wearing their clothes in the same poses. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. At 6:30 p.m. on May 14th, 1955, a 24-year-old man named Donald Giroux stood next to his friend, 28-year-old Murray Anderson, on the shore of a natural spring in the state of Georgia. The spring was called Radium Springs because literally there was radium in the water. Radium is a naturally occurring, highly radioactive metallic element, but there were such low levels of it in the water that it wasn't really a hazard. However, the radium did have an effect on the water. It made it practically neon blue, and so it was totally mesmerizing. I mean, you look at this thing and you know there's something different about this spring. Also, this spring was incredibly deep. So Donald and Murray were both members of the US Navy, and so naturally they spent a lot of time, in and around water, because that's what the Navy does. They work in and around water. But ironically, it was actually when Donald and Murray were not working that they spent the most amount of time in the water. Because in their off time, they were recreational scuba divers. Except back in 1955, recreational scuba diving was totally not safe. And that was because, underwater diving certainly existed at the time. I mean, institutions like the Navy, they were prolific divers. But civilians did not really dive on their own. And so as a result, if you wanted to recreationally scuba dive, well, you didn't really have access to good equipment or even proper equipment. I mean, there just wasn't anything available to you. And so for people like Donald and Murray who did want to go explore the underwater abyss on their own, they had to literally make their own diving equipment, like their own oxygen tanks and their own flashlights and goggles. I mean, all of it. I mean, it was amateur. It was homemade equipment. And so that's what made it really dangerous. On top of when you're underwater diving, as I've done myself, a lot of things can go wrong. And so that's also dangerous. And so the whole thing, it's asking for problems. But for Donald and Murray, it was actually the danger associated with recreational diving that made it so appealing. They liked the idea that other people were scared to go underwater, with their DIY equipment. For Donald and Murray, they loved it. They got a thrill out of it. And on top of that, they kind of felt like explorers. They got to go to places underwater where literally nobody else had gone before. In fact, they had already gone to other locations and mapped out, tunnels and underwater cave systems and all these different things that literally nobody else had done before. And they loved it. And today was going to be no different, because there were sections in Radium Springs that nobody had mapped, and they were going to go down there and see it for themselves. So after the two men looked at each other and nodded and just kind of gave the signal it was time to begin the dive, they donned their amateur equipment, their oxygen tanks and their goggles and their flippers, and then they walked into the neon blue water and submerged. A few minutes later, Donald and Murray had traveled about 70 feet straight down the water column. And at this point, the light is really fading. They can't really see too well. They did have flashlights that they had rigged up, that they had waterproofed. But at this point, down 70 feet, it's getting pretty dark. But right in front of them, off to the side, was this huge entrance, this underwater tunnel entrance. And this was actually a well-known cavern. Like, this is actually where other recreational divers would go to if they went to Radium Springs. It was this cavern. But while the entrance to the cavern had been sort of mapped out and searched, there were all these little spidery offshoots once you got into this cavern that had not been explored. And so what Donald and Murray were going to do is go into the cavern and then basically start, splintering off and seeing what else was in there and mapping it out. Now, as much as Donald and Murray did like the sort of risks associated with this activity, they weren't completely reckless. They had attached a dive line when they had gone into the spring that they attached to the surface, and they fed down with them. It's a 200-foot line, and they carried it with them. The lead diver would basically unspool as they went. The two divers would be right next to each other, and they'd be holding on to this line. And so when they would go into this cavern, if for some reason they got turned around, or if they got totally confused, whatever it was, they could always just follow their line back out of the cavern, back up to the surface. This was not like rocket science. This is something that divers today still do. So using a dive line, very common practice, and Donald and Murray were doing just that. And so they went into this cavern, they got their dive line spooling out, and everything is totally fine. But once they were inside of this cavern, all the light completely went away. I mean, the cavern was relatively spacious, but the light is coming straight down, and this tunnel entrance is basically, horizontal. And so once they're inside of this cavern, it's utterly pitch black. But Donald and Murray have dove other underwater cave systems. They knew going in how dark this cave system was going to be. They had their flashlights, that they had jerry-rigged to be waterproof, and they're holding on to their line, and they're going into this cavern looking for their first offshoot. But as they're going into this cavern, there's all this silt, all this mud that's kind of caked to the walls and the floor that began getting kicked up from their flippers and bumping into it. And before long, because of the silt and the lack of light, they could basically only see maybe 6 inches in front of them. Like, even shining their light, all they'd see is all the silt. And so very quickly, the visibility basically fell to 0. But, again, they're going in knowing this is the environment they're going into. They're confident, they're cool, they're moving along. But as the two divers were continuing through the cavern, getting deeper and deeper, and it's starting to get more and more restrictive, the deeper they go, they were about to go into this offshoot when Donald suddenly started seeing all these air bubbles coming up against him. And now he can't quite see where they're coming from, but there's only one place that an air bubble could be emerging from, and that's from his oxygen tank. And so clearly there's some sort of issue. He can't see because it's so dark. He also has homemade equipment, and so the risk of catastrophic failure is pretty high with his equipment. And so he begins trying to figure out where this leak is coming from, checking his equipment, trying to make it stop, but he can't. He can't really communicate to Walter, who's got the spool of dive line, who's continuing straight forward into this offshoot. He can't quite tell him what's going on. They can't actually speak to each other. Again, it's pitch black, there's silt, it's sort of, claustrophobic and stressful. And so ultimately, Donald grabs Murray and just tries to shake him and sort of signal, hey, I got an issue here, but he had no way of knowing if Murray actually understood. But Donald, he knew he just had to get out of there. He had to go back to the surface and fix his issue before it got way worse. And so, even though he knew he was kind of leaving his buddy here, he's thinking, okay, Murray's got the dive line, he's experienced, I just grabbed him, everything's gonna be okay. And Donald turned around, kicked up more silt, and held onto that dive line, but now followed it back out of the cavern and back up to the surface. And when he got to the surface, he took a big breath. He was saved, he checked his equipment and realized, wherever the issue was, and he was actually able to fix the issue. And so before long, after only being on the surface for a couple of minutes, he had put his equipment back on, he was back in the water and following the dive line back down towards the cavern. As Donald began his descent down towards that cavern, 70 feet down, the whole time he's holding onto the dive line, making sure he doesn't lose that. But really what he's focused on is checking his equipment, because as he's going down, he's got basic visibility here. It's not gonna be like in the cavern where you can't see anything. And so as he's going down, he's checking his equipment and just making sure that there isn't a leak. And by the time he got all the way down 70 feet and the dive line turned and went into that cavern, Donald was feeling pretty good that his equipment was good, it was not malfunctioning, and it was safe to go back into the cavern with Murray. And so that's what he does. He's got his flashlight in one hand, he's got the dive line in the other, and he's now looking straight into this dark opening of this cavern, and in Donald goes, the whole time holding on to that dive line. And pretty much immediately, once inside the cavern, the flashlight became useless because again, the silt's still kicked up, there's no current running through this cavern, so the silt is not going anywhere. But either way, Donald knew what he was doing. He was going straight in there to connect with Murray and continue this dive and see what else is in here and, map it out for other divers. And so into the cavern he goes, he's holding the dive line in one hand, he's got his flashlight and he's going deeper and deeper into this cavern. And the whole time he's expecting at any moment, he's just gonna bump into Murray. But he just keeps going and going deeper and deeper into the system. The walls are getting tighter and tighter around him. And eventually he reaches the very end of the dive line, 200 feet at this point, deep into this cavern. And there's no Murray. Murray's gone. Now Donald, he's looking around. Remember, it's total darkness. All he's got is this flashlight, which basically just illuminates the silt that's been kicked up all around him. But where he is at this exact moment, the silt wasn't too bad. It was just like this abyss all around him. It's totally black. There's nothing around him. And in a sudden panic, Donald thinks, oh my goodness, I'm so far into this cavern, I haven't found Murray, like something's happened to him. He's run out of air or he's gotten lost. Like, how could he have let go of the dive line? What's going on here? And so Donald immediately just starts going down to the bottom of the cave and searching the ground, thinking that, maybe Murray got to this point and passed out and sunk to the bottom, but he gets to the bottom of the cave, there's nothing there, he starts feeling the tunnels, there's nothing, and at this point he's kicked up even more silt, and so he really can't see anything. And he's thinking, it took me a while to get in here, and I'm running low on oxygen right now. I need to get help immediately, because Murray, he's gonna run out of time really quickly here. And so Donald, he turns around and holding onto this dive line, he pulls himself out of the cavern, he goes back to the surface. Some part of him was hoping that when he got up there that he would just magically see Murray waiting for him, but nope, he's all alone, there's nobody here. And at that point, Donald took off his gear and he contacted authorities. Not long after that, 2 commercial divers, along with an entire US Navy dive team, arrived at Radium Springs and began looking for Murray. And they searched and they searched and they couldn't find him until 8 a.m. the next morning, 12 hours after Donald had surfaced. It would turn out when Donald had that malfunction that caused him to leave the cavern and leave Murray behind and go to the surface and fix himself and then go back down again. Well, in that space of time that he was away from Murray, Murray continued to spool out the dive line, maybe not necessarily knowing that Donald had left him at this point, and Murray got all the way to the end of the dive line, 200 feet, and at that point, in this uncharted tunnel he was in, somehow or another, Murray became disconnected from the dive line. Maybe he let go of it, maybe he bumped into something, we don't know, but either way, he let go of the dive line, basically right at the end of the dive line. And when Donald came back down and got to the end of that dive line and discovered Murray wasn't there, well, what he didn't know is that Murray actually was just a couple of feet away. He was basically right above him, because that's where Murray was ultimately found. He had drowned literally feet away from the dive line, but Donald, he couldn't see him, and in a total panic state, in an effort to find Murray, Donald began fumbling around, going down and rubbing up against the bottom and the walls, kicking up all this silt. And you gotta figure at this exact moment, Murray, who's very much alive at this point, almost certainly, is right above him, and now his visibility, which was already terrible, he's probably scared to death because he's looking for this dive line, and now the silt is just getting kicked up all around him. He probably knows Donald's nearby. He's swimming around looking for Donald. Donald's looking for Murray. They swim right past each other. It's absolute madness. But then eventually Donald just vanishes because he's going to find help. And Murray is left all by himself in total darkness, disoriented, terrified, has no idea where the dive line is. Silt is making it impossible to know what direction he's even going. And so in Murray's final moments, he just scrambled around trying to find his way out again until he eventually drowned, again, just feet away from his dive line, the very thing that would have brought him to safety.
Wow.
I ain't gonna hold you. That's tragic as hell, bro. I keep saying, bro, the water joints are just insane, bro. Divers found today the body of a Navy lieutenant and veteran skin diver who had died in an underwater cave, was exploring in Radiant Springs. The body was near a guide road that would have led to safety. Dang, that's even
That's
more.
the part I stopped right there. After I read the part, I just stopped reading. I was just like, because that's sad. Such as no. Like, I see you, or maybe, you may not see him, because y'all probably don't see each other. But true. I'm right here. You're literally right there. The guideline is literally right here. Like, we're all in the same vicinity, and
I just can't get back to safety,
no one
bro.
can see.
At 28. At 28.
That is sad.
Bro, I stayed. Yes, I gotta stay my black ass out that water, bro.
That's so sad.
It's not meant for me like that, bro.
Rest in peace to Murray, though.
Rest in peace. But I will say, I am thankful for those who, you know what I'm saying, that is what they do, because we do need those people who, you know what I'm saying, like, are courageous enough to, like, do the diving, do, you know what I'm saying, the exploring of things that most of us don't, you know what I'm saying, or don't have the courage enough to do, you know? So I do appreciate that, but, man, I ain't gonna lie, every freaking joint we do, the 3, it always ends up with one of the stories being like this, if not at least 2 of them in the story.
Yeah.
And it's just, man, it's a lot, bro. R.I.P. to Murray, though, man. That's a tragic way to go out.
Facts.
Like, rescue is right there. It just can't get you. Because I'm sure they even, because they didn't find him for 12 hours later. I'm sure they searched that, and he was there, and they still wasn't able to rescue him.
See him.
Yeah, well, yeah.
To rescue him, but yeah. If anything.
Tragic, bro.
Yeah.
On May 28, 2022, a photographer named April Vertucci, along with 2 of her friends, snuck towards this abandoned funeral home in Flint, Michigan. The funeral home was a big brick building right off a main road in the center of the city, and April and her 2 friends knew there were lots of people that were kind of looking in this direction, and it was illegal to go into this property, and so very carefully they snuck their way towards the back door of the building. And they saw the door was, completely attached to its hinges. It was in good shape, appeared to be locked, but they thought, what the heck? They walked up to the door, took a look around. April reached down, tried the handle, and it pulled right open. And as soon as this happened, April was psyched. Because not only was she a photographer, but she was also an urban explorer, which meant she would sneak into places like this, abandoned buildings and other man-made sites, just to have a look around. One, because it was fun and exciting, but also because she got to use her photography, taking cool pictures of places like this funeral home. And so April's friends were also into urban exploring, and as soon as this door came open, it was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe we're gonna get to explore this legendary site. So this funeral home had been shut down about 5 years earlier because of reports of unsanitary conditions inside. Anonymous reporters had gone in and discovered that there were literally like human remains out. There were up to 40 bodies being stored in one room with no air conditioning, so they're just rotting. There's maggots all over the place. There's embalming liquids on the ground. There's blood everywhere. I mean, basically, this place was like the site of a horror movie. And so the state comes in, they shut this place down, and the owner, after being shut down, just abandons the building, just leaves it exactly the way they had left it. I mean, the bodies were removed by the state, but all the equipment for the funeral home was just left behind. Everything was sealed up, and that was that. And the place was deemed off limits. But naturally, urban explorers found out about this and began going in to see this horror show for themselves. And so April and her friends, they had heard about this place and immediately were like, we gotta go in there, we gotta see it for ourselves. And so they hopped in a car and they drove over 3 hours from Ohio to Michigan just to check this place out. And now here they were, door open, and in they go. Once the door shut behind them, April and her two friends were looking down this long, dark hallway. It's totally silent inside. The walls were made out of cinder block that had been painted white, but the paint was all chipping off and they had their flashlights out and it's dark and creepy and they're looking down the hallway. And just for a second, they just stop and listen to see if anybody else is inside of here moving around. You know, maybe other urban explorers or even other animals or anything, squatters, they don't know. But they're sitting there for a second just listening and they don't hear anything. And so with April in front, they begin walking down this hallway. And as they're walking, there's all this trash on the ground. It's totally eerie as they're walking. You know, every little sound is sort of startling them. They're kind of laughing as they're going. And eventually, April stops in front of this first door that she sees, the first door off the hallway, and it's closed. And right across the center of this door is this big caution sign saying, you know, stay back. And then underneath the caution sign, it says formaldehyde. And so April and her friends knew that, okay, well, formaldehyde is a chemical used to embalm bodies, something funeral homes did. And so they know that behind this door very likely was the embalming room, where funeral homes would literally pump dead bodies full of formaldehyde and prep the bodies, you know, to be presented at the wake, you know, before they're actually laid to rest. You know, it's like this is where actual dead bodies are manipulated. And so April and her friends are pretty excited. And so April's, you know, she opens up the door and they look inside of this room and it's very eerie. It's pretty much vacant. But in the center of this room, it's all dark. They have their flashlights, right? In the center of the room is this metal table, this standalone metal table. It's like a gurney. And it's where the dead body would be placed as they're being embalmed. And then on the walls all around are all these shelves with various tools and, you know, vials of various milky liquids. There's a saw, there's scissors, there's scalpels. On the ground, there's, you know, fabric that appears to have some sort of bodily fluids on it. I mean, this really looks like the scene of a horror movie. But for April and her friends, it's like, this is a gold mine. I mean, this is what we came here for. And so April and her friends, for the next little bit, they just began walking all around the embalming room. You know, April taking photos and her friends and April kind of moving things around, seeing what was in there. And then eventually, you know, they left and they continued to search the building and they found a chapel where there were caskets laying around. They also went into a garage and they found there was an old hearse just left inside the garage. I mean, the place really was as creepy as everybody said it was. And so it was sometime around discovering the garage that the girls had gone back to the main hallway and they discovered this other door that they hadn't seen when they were searching over the first 30 minutes they had been in there. And this door led to this ominous stairwell that went down into what appeared to be the basement. And so at this point, you know, the girls felt like they had sort of searched the entire main floor. And, you know, the two friends, not April, they really wanted to go down these steps and explore the basement. You know, they'd been here long enough that it seemed pretty clear that they were the only ones there. It had been totally quiet. And even though it was creepy, I mean, ultimately, they sort of felt safe at this point. And April did too, but she also was having a great time still taking pictures on the first floor. And so at this point, the group decided to split up. The two friends would go down into the basement, and April, for a little bit longer, would stay up on the first floor and just continue taking photos, and then she would join them. And so, no big deal, they split up, the girls go down to the basement, April's taking her photos, doing her thing, and just a couple of minutes later, April hears her friends in the basement, through the floors, yelling out something to the effect of, "Oh my gosh, is that real?" And then the other friend is like, "Yes, that is real, oh my gosh." And so April, she runs to that doorway, she goes down the stairs, and she finds her friends at the foot of the stairs. And they're looking out into the main space of the basement that April can't quite see yet. And so she goes right down to her friends, she's looking at them. They look horrified, they're looking out at something obviously terrible in the basement. And April turns from her friends to the basement, and what she sees makes no sense. There's just like this empty basement, with some stuff pushed up against the walls, but in the middle of the basement is what appears to be like this standalone metal jail cell. Like imagine metal rungs that you would imagine in a jail, but all the way around. It's about 8 feet tall, 10 feet wide, 4 feet deep. It's just this inexplicable standalone jail cell. At least that's the way April interpreted it, and so did her friends. And as she's looking at it, April, she sees that in the middle of the jail cell, if you will, is like this big metal box that's just sitting on the floor in the center of the cell. And then right above it in the ceiling is this pretty big cutout, like a hole in the ceiling. And so April sees this and takes in what she's seeing, and she can't really process it. She doesn't really understand what this is. And she's looking at her friends, and they're so horrified. They've been yelling out about something being real, like, what is that? Oh my gosh. And she's kind of looking back and forth, and then she sees it. She sees there's something else inside of this jail cell. And when she sees it, she recoils in horror. She grabs her friends. They sprint out of the funeral home, and they call the authorities. When authorities arrived, they went right down into the basement and they looked inside of that jail cell, and quickly they determined that April and her friends had not been alone inside of this building like they had thought. It would turn out 6 days earlier, a local man who had nothing to do with April and her friends, totally separate, had gone to this funeral home to have a look around. Except he wasn't an urban explorer. He was not going in here to have a good time or take photos. He was going inside to steal scrap metal and try to sell it for a profit. And so he made his way inside the funeral home. He looked around, he didn't really find much, but eventually went down into the basement. And when he got down there, he turned, he looked out at that space down there, and he saw this jail cell, this metal jail cell that just kind of sat in the middle of the basement. Except what he would have seen is just the bars that sort of surrounded the outside of the cell, the actual cell itself. The metal box in the middle that was on the floor that April saw and her friend saw, that was not there. And the hole in the ceiling would not have been there. He would have just seen basically a lot of metal in the middle of the basement. Right. So he's thinking, I've hit the jackpot. This is exactly what I've come here for, to take this metal and go sell it. And so this man, he goes into the jail cell, into this cage, and he quickly realizes the actual metal struts that made up the cage, even if they were super valuable, they were thick and difficult to cut through, and so realistically, they were gonna be really hard to extricate and get out of this place. But when the man is actually inside of this jail cell, this cage, he sees there's actually some other metal that he hadn't seen when he first came down that might be far easier to extract. Basically, right in the middle of this cell were additional metal rods that were running from the ceiling down to the ground. They were far thinner and easier to move around. And he's thinking, I could actually cut these and get these out of here and turn a profit on them, and then come back at a later date with, more people or more powerful tools to cut the metal that sort of was the cage, the stuff that he had originally seen. And so, feeling pretty optimistic, the guy put his stuff down, his phone, his wallet, his other things off to the side, in the cage. And then he got out his bolt cutters and he cut the very first one of these thinner cables right in the middle of the cell. And as soon as he cut one of them, there was this loud rumbling sound he would have heard right above him. And then this big metal box came crashing down and pinned him to the ground. It would turn out what this man had walked inside of was not a jail cell in the basement of the funeral home. It was actually the inner workings of something known as a casket lift. Basically, the funeral home has to raise caskets from the basement where potentially they're stored up to the main floor to be used. And, they're pretty cumbersome, big things that need to get moved around. And so effectively, they have an elevator that brings them up. And so that big metal box that came crashing down on this guy was the actual lift itself that actually carried up the caskets. And the cord that he cut were actually the cords that supported that lift. And so as soon as he cut one of them, he was cutting the support to effectively the elevator car that was right above him that then fell and crushed him. However, he didn't die from getting crushed. He just got trapped. And as soon as he realized he was trapped and being kind of crushed to death here, he reached for his phone, but he realized his phone was just barely outside of his reach. He couldn't get to his phone. And nobody knew he was here. This was an illegal activity. He didn't broadcast where he was going. And so he's stuck. He can't call anyone, and no one knows he's here.
Oh,
and so for 6 days, that lift gradually crushed this man to death. And then finally, when April and her friends showed up and they went down in the basement, they didn't just see, this destroyed casket lift. They saw this dead man's body, and he was literally outstretched, still reaching for his phone.
That's tragic, bro. You talking about tragic?
That is horrible and painful and slow. Like a slow, painful death.
Facts.
Like, I could only imagine, like...
Oh, and it was in June.
Okay, slow, painful, hot.
Wow, that sucks.
Wait, was that his name?
Where?
No, I don't know. But yeah, that's sad.
That's what I was looking for. I was trying to see if there was a name attached to it.
Yeah.
Like the articles I'm just saying says man killed. The victim is identified as 28-year-old Stephen. Nah, that's different. Never mind. That's a whole different. Let me see. That's another situation though. Patrick passed away at his obituary.
No. I don't know. I have to look, but definitely rest in peace to him, because that's horrible.
Trying to see. Normally.
Okay, I think that maybe.
It's to Scrapper building. He was building a home,
It's not in that paragraph.
Yeah, the articles there's articles about it, but it's not any articles identifying. And I'm sure Ballin kind of looked into it, and he was not able to as well. Yeah, R.I.P. though, man. That is tragic, man. Horrible way to go out, and literally, like, you just dying. You know what I'm saying?
And then the thing, like, because like I said, what's going through, like, your phone right here. Like, just like, I'm just like, I'm like
probably inches away, and I just can't
help, but I just can't get to my phone, and you just there alone.
Yo, in pain, probably screaming out for help. Facts. I don't even want to think about it, man. Yeah. Let's keep going. That's tragic.
On the morning of September 10th, 1987, police constable Dick Ellis walked into an interview room in a police station in South Yorkshire, England. Inside of this room was a table, and sitting on the other side of this table were these two security guards. One was named Stephen Brooks, and the other was named David Goldthorpe. And from PC Ellis's perspective, his first impression of these two guys is they were like big, burly, tough-looking men. He could tell they were both visibly shaken, like something had really rattled both of these guys. However, before Ellis could even sit down and begin asking basic questions about what was going on here, these two security guards just launched into this totally crazy-sounding story. The men told Ellis that the night before, they had been patrolling this construction site, where workers were building a 6-mile stretch of highway and bridge that were called the Stocks Bridge Bypass. Now, at this time of night, there was nobody at the site, no workers, nothing like that. And so really it was the security guard's job to make sure nobody entered the site and either tampered with equipment or tried to steal anything. Now, the night had been very routine and quiet until around midnight. It was at that point that David and Stephen, these two security guards, had reached the bridge, the half-constructed bridge portion of this bypass. And as they're walking along the highway and they see the bridge out in front of them, they stopped because they saw clearly there was a figure standing on this bridge. It almost looked like a man who was wearing a long jacket, like a cloak or something, and he appeared to be staring down below the bridge, down towards the valley underneath what the bridge was actually going over. Like this man clearly had not spotted the security guards. And so naturally, they began calling out to this guy, asking him like, hey, what are you doing here? What's going on? This is a private construction site, like you need to go. But the guy on the bridge didn't react. He just kept staring down to the valley below. And so at that point, as the two security guards are now walking in the direction of this guy, one of them lifts up his flashlight and shines it at this man. And when he does, the beam of light appears to just go through this man's body, like his body isn't solid, and the light just passed right through. And as soon as they did that, both Stephen and David just stopped, shocked at what they're seeing, aiming this light at the sky. And as they're doing this, the figure appeared to kind of turn and look at David and Stephen. And they were so unsettled and terrified by it that instead of protecting the construction site, they just turned and ran. And they went to the police. Now, after P.C. Ellis had been told this story, he did not believe in any way that what they had experienced was supernatural. He's thinking, okay, clearly, you saw some guy and, maybe he shouldn't have been there and maybe it was a trick of the light or something, or maybe that wasn't a person at all and you just thought it was. Like, who knows? But there has to be a logical, rational explanation here. And so feeling kind of annoyed that he was called in to deal with this, Ellis looks at these two guys and he's like, look, this is not a police matter. Why don't you guys, if you're so shaken up by this, go talk to the church or something. Like, this is not something we can help you with. And at that, the two security guards just said, okay. And they got up and they left. And Ellis, truthfully, didn't think about this at all. It was like, okay, great, that's done. I don't got to deal with that. And he went on with his day. But later that day, Ellis got a call from his boss being like, hey, did you tell two security guards who came in here to go talk to the church about some ghosts they saw at a construction site or something? And at this, Ellis had to kind of explain what had happened and how he had sort of flippantly told them to go see the church if they really thought they saw a ghost. But his boss was like, well, they took you literally, and they are currently at the local church, those two security guards right now, and they are refusing to leave unless the church helps them with this ghost situation. And so Ellis's boss told him that you just need to go to the church, get these two guys to calm down, and leave. Go do that right now. And so Ellis is like, I can't believe they took that seriously. Okay, fine. So he hops in his cruiser, he goes to the church, he finds these two guys who are still totally shaken up, and they're pleading with people to take them seriously. Somebody needs to go out there and see what's on the bridge, see what this could have been. And Ellis is like, guys, I will tonight go to the bridge, I will check it out, I'll see what's going on there if you leave the church and you don't come back. Like, leave these people alone. And at this, David and Stephen, they're totally relieved. They're like, oh, you will? Oh my gosh, great. We'll leave, thank you, like, let us know what you find. And they left the church. And so they left, and P.C. Ellis is like, okay, great, I guess tonight I'm gonna go looking for ghosts. And so that night, around midnight, P.C. Ellis and his partner drove over to the construction site. Specifically, they went to the bridge. They got on the road that actually went underneath this unfinished bridge, and they camped out on this lower road. Looking straight up in front of them was this bridge. They're basically just gonna monitor this bridge because that's where the security guards claim to have seen this figure, this ghost. They're gonna stake out this bridge, see what happens, call it good. Now, at first, nothing happened on this bridge. Ellis and his partner just sat there staring bored up at this bridge, waiting for, the time to pass by so they could leave. But at some point, Ellis noticed movement up on the bridge, and so did his partner. Now, they couldn't quite tell what it was, and they couldn't even see if it was still moving around anymore, but clearly something had moved on the bridge. And so for a couple of seconds, Ellis and his partner are just staring really intently up at the bridge, waiting to see something else happen, but, nothing else did. And so Ellis is like, well, I got to go up there and check because, maybe there is some guy who's trespassing on the construction site and that's what the security guard saw. Like, I got to go up there and see because from down here, we really can't see too well. And so Ellis told his partner to just stay put in the car, that he, Ellis, would go up on the bridge and have a look around. And so Ellis, he got out of the car. All he had was a flashlight and he began walking over to the bottom of this bridge. And there was actually a ladder he would have to climb up to the actual bridge because remember, they're on the road below this bridge. And so Ellis, he gets to the ladder, he begins climbing up the ladder, and as he's going up, he's kind of staring up, almost expecting somebody to poke their head over, but it's quiet, no one's looking over the edge. And eventually Ellis gets to the top and he climbs onto the bridge. And again, it's this unfinished bridge, there's no traffic up here. And he looks roughly in the direction of where he thought he saw movement when he was down in the car looking up here, which also happened to be roughly the area where the two security guards had described seeing the figure that their light had shone through. And sure enough, Ellis looks and he sees there's this cloaked figure standing a little ways off of the side of the bridge, apparently just looking down towards his police car. And Ellis, at first, he's kind of shocked. He can't believe that there's some legitimacy to the story these guys had told. And he couldn't help but be kind of frightened for a second. But then Ellis raised his flashlight and shined it at this figure. And as soon as he did, he just laughed. Because all it was a plastic tarp wrapped around some construction equipment. That's what the security guards clearly had seen. And, when they shine their light, it's a clear plastic tarp here. The light could theoretically go through it. You can kind of see how they would think, oh my gosh, it's a ghost. And so Ellis is like, this is all this was. This was nothing. I knew it was nothing, and now I know it's nothing. And so after doing a cursory walk around the bridge to, make sure nobody was up there, and, he looked around, there wasn't anybody there. Ellis went back to the ladder, climbed back down, got in the car with his partner, and explained to him that this whole thing was a joke. And of course, there's no ghost, there's no criminals, there's nothing. This is no big deal. Now, Ellis and his partner could have, at this point, just left and gone home, but they had told their boss they'd come out here for at least an hour, and they'd only been here for maybe 30 minutes at this point. And so the two of them decided, you know what, just because we said we would, let's just stay here a little bit longer and make sure nobody goes on this bridge. We'll give it another, 30 minutes or so. And so Ellis and his partner just kind of sit back in their seats and settle in for this last little stretch of their shift. However, about 20 minutes into this final 30 minutes, Ellis is still just sitting there, his window's open, and he's just kind of doing nothing, waiting around, when suddenly he's hit with this unbelievably cold gust of air that comes into the car through his window. And it's kind of sudden, he's being hit with this gust of cold air. And then at the same time, Ellis began feeling this incredible pressure on his chest. It was so intense, he thought he was having a heart attack. And he wanted to say something to his partner, but it was he couldn't even move. He's frozen, he's getting scared, he doesn't know what's happening. And as much as he wanted to yell out and get his partner's attention to help him, he suddenly had this overwhelming feeling that there was someone off to the side staring at him, someone right outside the car. And even though he didn't want to look, he found himself slowly turning and looking out his open window. And right there, immediately outside the door, is this man standing practically pressed up against the window. His torso is inches away from Ellis's face, just standing there inexplicably. This guy snuck up on them. They didn't even hear him. And so Ellis, at this point, he breaks out of his sort of trance. He screams and gets his partner's attention. And then he pushes open his door and he jumps out to confront this person who snuck up on them. But there's no one outside the car. And so Ellis, he turns to his partner and he's like, hey, did you just see what I just saw? Did you see that guy? And Ellis's partner, who's totally ashen-faced, just looks at Ellis and he's like, yeah, I did see him. And so after looking around for a couple more seconds, Ellis climbed back into the car and then he and his partner debriefed what had just happened. And Ellis's partner would tell Ellis that from his seat, he actually had a better vantage point than Ellis did to seeing this guy. Ellis was basically right on top of this guy, but his partner was a little bit farther back and had a better angle. And he would tell Ellis that at some point he had turned and seen the guy standing there. And the guy, he was wearing this old coat, this long coat that sort of looked like it belonged in the 1800s or something. And the partner would say, he didn't hear this guy approach. He didn't know how he got there. But at some point, He said the guy in the coat, the guy outside, crouched down just enough that he was looking in the car in the direction of Ellis's partner. And Ellis's partner said he was staring right at the guy, but the guy, he had no face. Ultimately, Ellis and his partner would return to the station that night, and they would file a report about what happened to them. But they would simply describe it as inexplicable phenomenon, and after filing it, they basically hoped they would never have to talk about it again. Except that wouldn't be possible, because shortly after filing that report, the construction was finished, and so the highway and the bridge were open to the public. And pretty much right away, people started dying on that bridge. Like a crazy high number of people just inexplicably would get in these fatal accidents on the bridge. And this bridge was not like especially hazardous. It was a beautiful brand new bridge. I mean, there really should not have been this many accidents. But it was not just that so many people were dying on this bridge inexplicably. No, also in tandem with all the fatal accidents were all the independently reported sightings of this dark figure standing on the bridge that had no face. So the leading theory amongst people who believe what's happening at this bridge is basically paranormal is that the construction of this bridge and the highway disturbed a gravesite, and that has led to all the tragedy and death that has followed. But they've never actually been able to prove if there really was a gravesite where this bridge or the highway was built. The two security guards, Stephen Brooks and David Goldthorpe, both quit their jobs. As for Ellis and his partner, they've never changed their stories, and they also have never found a reasonable explanation for what they saw.
You would have quit. Would you have quit your job?
Crazy. Probably.
I ain't gonna hold you. I probably, I don't know.
Like, I have to be working. Or where they was just security while they was doing the it just depends on the situation, the circumstances. Like, do they have to be there like 24/7, like secure? Like, what type of security?
Probably not like 24/7, but it was like their shift job where like, oh, we work security on the bridge.
Or maybe he's saying they quit before it was done.
Or maybe they just quit being security altogether and just said, I'm not.
I probably want to quit being security altogether, but I won't want to go back to that location.
But that's where you were like stationed at.
This one, yeah.
You saying, but I'm saying they tell you, hey, well, you can't. You have to be that.
Yeah, I'm quitting.
Say fuck it.
It's a no-brainer. I'm bye.
Fuck that damn shit. I ain't coming back.
Yeah, I'll be the person go. You know what happened? Yeah. I don't think you want to work at this site. I'll be reaching out to folks trying to save everybody, child.
Yeah, no.
That's sad though.
Yeah, that is sad, man. Crazy, man. But hey, y'all spam us up, man. Let us know y'all thoughts about it for us in the comment section down below. But until next time, y'all know how it go, man. I do go by the name DJ New Kid. This is
Here the post.
We are. We are.
Go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack of flip for my foes. Dollar, 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 dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar, 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 dollar. Let me watch out for my partner.